Welcome to Hope is Here, bringing hope to those struggling with life's difficult situations.
Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is GregJHorn, and one of my favorite things about doing Hope is Here is just hearing people share incredible stories of overcoming obstacles, setbacks, trauma. And we've been here this week at the National Consumer Product Exhibition, and there's been authors all over the country, and with me today is the author from Tacoma, Washington, John Jarman. He's written a really powerful book called Broken and Redeemed, Finding Freedom through Complete Surrender. John, first of all, thanks for joining us on Hope is Here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad it worked out.
Well, broken and redeemed, man, I think we're all broken, but unfortunately a lot of us don't get redeemed. And man, as you were sharing with me yesterday when we happened to meet, you know what it's like to be broken, don't you?
Yes, sir. But there's also the brokenness of Christ that brings you to that redemption, and that's the beauty. That's the beautiful side of brokenness. So, you know, there's two. I refer to this in the book. There's two sides of brokenness. There's the brokenness of the world, and then it's the brokenness that Christ puts you through to find that freedom and get the redemption. So, because it takes a little work and it's not too pleasant sometimes. It's painful because you got to look inside yourself.
Well, one of the things I love, you're willing to look inside. On the outside, you're a big, strong guy. You've owned gyms and ran them, and you're an entrepreneur. You're a man's man. But I think I've found, at least in my journey as a man for a little over 50 years now, that us guys, we're kind of good at wearing masks, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, because we're supposed to be that tough guy, and we're not supposed to lay down our pride and be weak or vulnerable. And unfortunately, that's what it takes, you know. And when I first became a Christian, it was the weak part of the meek shall inherit. I was like, I don't want to be weak. I can't be weak. That's what I thought. But it's not that. It's the weakness of realizing that you need help. That's what the weak of the Bible talks about. And I'm just like, why didn't somebody tell me this earlier?
Yeah, it's funny. I had the same experience with that word meek in the Bible.
Right.
I associate with weak, and then I was a guest on this guy's TV program, and he always had a word of the week, and he gave me that word meek, and I was like, oh man, I almost asked for another word, but then I started researching, and it said it's actually strength under control. And so, it's one of those things until you get in God's Word and learn some things, you realize that it's actually not weakness, is it?
No, it's not. And the toughest thing for you and I and the men listening is to become vulnerable, because we're not supposed to be vulnerable. You know, we're supposed to be the leaders. We're supposed to, and it's tougher for us, I think, to raise our hand and say that we need help. But that's what you need to do, because we're not designed to go through life by ourselves. It's supposed to be a community. It's supposed to be the church. And a lot of people, I think, don't raise their hand, especially men, when they've been victims of trauma or survivors of trauma, because they're so ashamed of what took place. They don't want anybody to know about it. My brother's dealing with that right now. He doesn't want anybody to know. And I'm like, Jason, you got a counselor. They're not going to judge you. They're just going to help you through it and let you see it and bring you to healing. But he still struggles with that. So,
well, you talked about trauma. Share some about your journey as a child, man.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very violent home. My dad was an abusive alcoholic. I don't have a lot of memory up until the age 12. One night when I was 12, he was beating up my mom, and I walked down in the kitchen, grabbed a knife, told him if he didn't stop, I was going to stab him. He left the next day, and it was my mom and three brothers left to survive. And so I didn't have much relationship with him until a few years later, probably 10, maybe 11 years later. But then with my mom trying to work, my oldest brother dropped out of high school to get a job to help support the family. We all kind of just went our own separate ways, and my way was I got into the drug world because it was a way to make money, and not proud of it, but it was the way I survived back then. And one night in 1987, it was the New Year's Eve of 1987, I was in a party, and I refer to it looking like a scene out of Scarface. There's cocaine, there's drug, there's booze all over the place. And I just looked around and I was like, there's more to life than this. I got up and I walked out. 2 days later, I walked into a Marine recruiting office. And I said, how fast can you get me out of here? And he said, did you commit a crime? And I said, yes. Never got caught, though. So he goes, what'd you do? And so I sat down with him. 2 months later, I was standing in San Diego in boot camp. And probably looking back on it, that was God's way of taking me out of that situation, because had I stayed there, I'd probably be dead or in jail. So,
wow.
And then
How old were you at that time, John?
I was 23.
23.
So 23,
Okay.
going into the Marine Corps. I went in to get an so I could go to school, because I was like, I want to go help kids not do what I did. So I want to be a teacher, a football coach, because football is a passion of mine. So I went through the Marine Corps. First Sunday after we got our drill instructors for the 3 months, because when you first go, you have orientation, and so you don't get your drill instructor for about 3 days. So the first Sunday, the drill instructor comes in and goes, "Who wants to go to church service? You get an hour vacation from us." And I was like, "Sign me up. Get away from you for an hour, okay." So I think that's where the seed was planted, because I don't know how much I really listened or paid attention. I just took it as an hour break. And, then I got out of the Marines, went to college, started my college career. And as I got into my college career in coaching, I got involved with FCA. So my faith started to develop, but I still held on to all that baggage and what I used to do, other than the drugs and alcohol. So then that progressed for a long time. Moved around coaching. I was coaching in Ohio, North Carolina, and Georgia. And then I lost my dad in 2003. And I'll go back to it real quick. When I was in the Marines, when I came back from Okinawa, I flew to his house, and I don't recommend this as a way to start forgiveness, but I knocked on his door. He didn't know I was coming. He opened the door, and I hit him in the mouth. He dropped to one knee, stood up, wiped the blood off his lip, and he said, "I deserve that. Let's go talk." And so I said, "Okay." And from that time on, we had a relationship till he passed in 2003.
Wow.
And so, but again, it's not the best way but that's all I knew at the time. So,
well, let's pause there for a moment. I think a couple things that come to mind to me. I love how, God shows up different way. You just showed up at our church service because it was just, an hour of freedom from everything else. So God planted the seed there. Then you get into coaching and you start doing the FCA thing, because that involves athletics, but obviously Jesus too. So it was kind of a process for you to find Jesus. Is that fair to say? Or?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it was a process until I met Scotty Kessler. Then it became, he discipled me. And that's where I think the church as a body misses. When we bring people to Christ, we don't follow up with them in discipleship. Because when someone comes new to Christ, they have many questions. They don't know how to read the Bible. They don't know how to pray. And that's where the discipleship comes along. And had I found Scotty earlier, it would have saved me a lot of time, but the timing of God is what it is. I had to go through everything. You go through your trials so that we can help others go through their trials. So this was all purpose. And I see that now because of my faith where it is now. But Scotty was, lifesaver. He's got a 10-step program to discipleship. With his permission, it's in the book. So if you're out there and you want to disciple somebody, it's a great tool, and it has a lot of stuff in it to help teach people how to pray, give gospel presentation, Bible memorization. The biggest one is the first step, and it's called Taco's Prayer. So you use the Taco's an acronyms of thanksgiving, adoration, confession, others, and self. That's the way we pray. And, I didn't realize that. So,
I hadn't heard of the tacos. I heard of the acts, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication, but I hadn't heard of the tacos method.
So we got tacos now. Tacos and acts. So we can axe on tacos.
If you just tuned in, you're listening on the radio. We are talking with author John Jarman. He has just recently wrote a wonderful book called Broken and Redeemed, Finding Freedom Through Complete Surrender. And John's a man's man. Served in the Marines, a football coach, owns a couple of gyms and runs those. And so I know we have a lot of men listeners, and ladies, maybe you want to share this with your sons or your husbands, significant others. But, John, we're going to get more detail about the book and share some of the things in that. But the thing I think it's so interesting that you said, you were willing to deal with your trauma, but, your brother's still kind of on that journey, because that's where most men are. They know it's there, but don't really want to go there, right?
Right. And I think it's their shame's too much. And the only way you're going to get over that shame is to get help, whether it be professional counseling or spiritual counseling or both, And, I was fortunate enough that the good Lord put two people in my life that just were fantastic. And so, as I told my brother, and this is for your male listeners, don't be afraid to be vulnerable when you're in a counseling session. It's just you and that counselor. They're not going to say anything unless you broke the law, then they have to report that. But if you didn't break the law, then they're going to listen to you, and they're going to give you different ways to start dealing with that. And Christina used the term, it's like peeling back an onion. And so as you peel the onion back and you start to get to the center, it starts to get a little bit more stinky, and and you cry a little bit more. Okay, and that's how I explain counseling to people, is because that's what's going to happen, because that self-examination of looking at yourself and what you've been through if you were a victim, and then how you carried that guilt and shame and bitterness throughout your life. And because I carried that, I affected a lot of people negatively, but I also affected a lot of people positively, because, I did do some right things, but I also made mistakes. And, I put some of them in the book. Some of them I kept out because I didn't want to open wounds of people that I've hurt, but it's going back and also seeking forgiveness from those people. And when some of my former football players, they saw the book, they direct messaged me through Facebook, and they said, "Coach, why weren't you like this when you coached us?" And I'm like, because I'm not the same person. Okay, that's the only answer I can give you. Forgive me, but I'm not the same person. And looking back on it, I don't regret that I didn't have this faith, because it wasn't God's timing. And that's the way I look at it, and that's the way I see it. But that's all I could tell my kids is, hey, I'm sorry, I wasn't where I am today. I'm a different person.
So I think that's so encouraging, so many guys listening, because I think we all have regrets. I know I do, and yet God, I love your book, Broken and Redeemed, but God really truly redeems those, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If you let him, but you got to get to know God. You have to have that personal, intimate relationship, and the only way, in my opinion, that you can do that is giving up your pride and your control and becoming vulnerable at the foot of the cross and humbling yourself. Because that's when you do that self-examination, you can start looking into your heart and seeing things that aren't of God. And that's tough for men sometimes, because we're not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to be these hard people and the leaders and tough guys. I'm a Marine, okay? It's like, they trained me to run into bullets, and now you're wanting me to be vulnerable? That was a hard thing for me to fathom for a long time. 2016 is when I gave up the control. In November 2016, I know the date. It's like, I want to say that, to me, that's almost my birthday as a Christian, because that's when I gave up the control, because that was what I held on to the longest, because since age 12, I controlled my life. Did what John wanted to do. So. Amen.
How old were you in November 2016?
Well, let's see. I got to think. That's how many years ago?
7 years ago?
7 years ago, so I was 52.
Okay.
So
I love that.
It took me 52 years to get there.
Well, I know there's somebody listening today that they're right in that same age range and thinking, man, it's too late for me to be redeemed, and yet it's not.
It's not too late, but what I would say is, don't wait. If you're younger than that, and don't wait. Raise your hand, say you need help, and go get it. That's the biggest message I can say, and that's what I talk about in my book too. Is don't wait. Yeah. Go get it. Go get the help. So.
Well, if you just tuned in, we've been talking with John Jarman. He is the author of a wonderful new book called Broken and Redeemed, Finding Freedom Through Complete Surrender. You heard that November of 2016, at the age of 52, that he finally, as I like to call, put the other knee down. And sometimes we put one knee down, but we don't put the second knee down. And I want to encourage you to go to his website. He's got a great website called brokennandredeemed.com. And I was just looking at some reviews of this book, and one of them that read it on Kindle actually said, as a Marine and someone who came from a broken home, I really enjoyed reading this book. I have struggled with some of my own issues over the years, but reading this book allowed me to feel things I have not expressed in many years. This book showed me there are different approaches for all issues. I've often questioned my spirituality, and this book opened up a door that had been closed for quite some time. It's a great read. So I know a lot of people have friends or loved ones that are in the military, so this would be a great, great book for them. And the good news is that we're going to share more about this book, some of John's story, as we continue this conversation with him tomorrow. So if you've been blessed by this program, I hope that you will share it with somebody else. But make sure you tune in again tomorrow as we'll continue our conversation with author John Jarman about his wonderful book called Broken and Redeemed on Hope is Here.
Thank you for listening to Hope is Here podcast. To listen to one of our previous programs or to make a tax-deductible donation, please go to our website, hopeishere.today. That's hopeishere.today. Sometimes ordinary tasks can become extraordinary feats. That's why there's the Joint Chiropractic to keep you moving. What life does to your body, we undo. Chiropractic is more than a solution for your back pain. It's key to a healthy and active life. Find your relief from everyday life and beyond at the Joint Chiropractic in Tates Creek Center. No appointments or insurance necessary. Open nights and weekends. Wellness starts here. For additional information, visit thejoint.com/15002.